Imagine yourselves last night. Perhaps some of you saw the minute hand of your bedroom clock slowly crawl over the 12 to the end of the day and over to the next one. 2:12 o'clock. The beginning and the end, the divider of night and day. Why 12 o'clock out of a day full of 24 hours? Why have it serve as the beginning and the end? 12 o'clock has been serving as a standard for many things. Yet, how many of these previous questions have you ever asked yourselves? Persistently stretching to meet the hour hand, the minute hand rarely aligns. The most noteworthy alignment being 12 o'clock. It may not seem like much until you try to picture the things that align perfectly in life. Take a look at the people around you. Go ahead, look. Do you think you could put on as much effort as that minute hand, ticking away continuously, trying to meet their expectations, their very own 12 o'clock? Probably not, which is why perfect alignment like 12 o'clock will most likely never happen for many people. Despite this, people attempt to align others under the same 12 o'clock. You see, aside from alignment, there's something else that 12 o'clock symbolizes: the attempt to make alignments. 12 o'clock is a standard amongst the numerous others that most people live under. What I mean by live under is that people set their lives according to the ones who follow standards, the mainstream. Why? Because that mainstream provides them a sense of security and seems like the reasonable thing to do since so many others are doing the same. And chances are, what the majority is doing is always reasonable, right? Well then, let's explore a bit more by taking a look at this very place we are in. School. Take a moment to think about your school days. From the moment you step through those doors, you are put under a standard. The first standard you may encounter may be coming into class before the bell. Then there's the standard behavior that you are expected to follow as you go on throughout your day. You spend the day jotting down notes and listening to lectures in preparation for a standardized test. That test hopes to assess you on a standardized scale. Standards here and standards there. You can't avoid them. They're everywhere. Then there must be some common ground in between us in order for the enforcement of these standards to work. And in most cases, there is. But is that really because there are so many people who share similarities? Or are those similarities the result of living under the same standards and striving towards the same 12 o'clock for so long? When you think about it, we did not decide upon 12 o'clock becoming a standard. And yet, here we are following it. Perhaps these standards are followed and can be enforced, not because we were similar from birth, but because you were made similar and steered onto the specific path, the specific way of thinking and living. Whichever it may be, whether it's standards making us similar or our similarities becoming the base of standards, the important thing is the power these standards hold should not be underestimated. Whether we are conscious of it or not, standards play a major part in our lives. They are more than just a guideline to keep the individual in line. They control us. You might be thinking, wait a second, if I'm the one who decides to follow a standard, then how could you say that standard is controlling me? Let's take another look at school. it is possible to choose not to take standardized tests and follow standardized rules. But the problem is, could you withstand the consequences? Without taking the standardized test, could you easily pursue the future you desire? Without following the standardized rules, would you be able to easily create trust between your peers? And it goes beyond school even for us. Without following the standard audience etiquette, maybe your consequence would be a longer speech from me. Though no one can force you to follow standards, they can show you what happens when you don't follow them. In fact, most systems are wired so that you'd be going against standards at your own expense. Let me show you how the standards in particular affect us. The standards children meet in education are one of the most important, as they play an impact on them throughout their lives. But before I move on, let me first take a moment to clarify some terminology. As I mentioned how standards control us by making us take a specific course of actions, some of you may be wondering if laws and regulations could also fall under this category. Standards are not to be confused with laws and regulations, however, as they do not carry the direct force of the law. In other words, not following a standard would not result in the commitment of illegal action. With that being clarified, let's get back to analyzing the impact of standards in education on students. Despite all the major breakthroughs in technology and change that has happened during the last centuries, the way students are educated has gone through little change in comparison. Students are still expected to memorize massive amounts of information that will appear on tests. It has reached the point where you could say that schools are not based on students, but on test takers. And because of such structure, students in return tend to focus a lot on information that will appear on tests and little on the things taught that will not. The main skill students learn from school becomes memorization. They learn how to memorize things quicker and more efficiently. And until recently, the education system in South Korea divided students into verbal and quantitative classes as they entered high school. This division alone signifies that schools are not aiming to create individuals that are ready to tackle on life's problems by coming up with creative solutions, or have them cultivate numerous viewpoints that can be achieved by learning subjects of different characteristics. Rather, they are trying to make them efficient in only a certain area, limit their thinking, and have them contribute to the development of their future workforce in only a certain sector. The obedience and following of standards students become used to during their school days makes them easy to control as they are placed under new standards that society gives them. Then, what can we do? For most of us, not following a standard would only result in our loss. I am not suggesting that you refuse taking tests and start breaking rules. Nor am I saying that you should view the education system negatively for refusing to see the differences between individuals and putting them under standards in the first place. What I want each one of you to do is to make sure that you are the one in control. Be aware that you are under standards and influenced by them. Students, if the education system isn't really making sure that you learn important skills outside of memorization, then that needs to change. Teachers, if your tests require that students view works of literature from a fixed viewpoint that is predetermined and rejects their own point of view, then that needs to change. The future of education lies in the present. Though it may not be able to become revolutionized, we can all pitch in by making sure that we stay in control. By starting with education, We can guide others so that they aren't blinded by standards. We can prevent people from becoming accustomed to accepting standards without thinking about them first. And most of all, we can help them stand up to standards when necessary. Understand the power standards hold on you, the power they play on our lives. And if there seems to be a problem with the way they are leading you, then go ahead and make the change. Instead of trying to align yourself with standards, meet in the middle. Though the way standards will impact us later on cannot be predicted, by thinking twice, the negative results can be prevented. So, the next time you lie in bed, look around you. Watch that minute hand once more. Is it still heading towards 12 o'clock? Is 12 o'clock still a standard for you? If not, you know what to do. Get out of bed and try standing up to standards. Thank you.